Welcome back. You're watching Beyond the Soundbites.
I told you, ladies and gentlemen, that that would be informative, well presented. Let us recognize that appropriately. You know, when Mr. Bertram mentioned the team going to Australia in 1932, and had to get permission because they were black players. I remember Vivian Blake telling me a story. That when he went to Australia, and he went to immigration, the immigration officer said to him, "Do you have a conviction?" He said, "No." "So are you absolutely sure that you don't have a conviction?" He said, "No, I don't have one." "So you sure?" Then he said to the man, the immigration officer, "Is it still a requirement to enter Australia?" you know, um, ladies and gentlemen, right? We talked about, when I started, I talked about politicians and so on and wit, But one of the greatest exponents of the devastating retort and so on, of course, was Sir Winston Churchill. And there are many stories that have been told about him. I don't know if you heard the one, I'll tell you very briefly, too. The one where he was campaigning, and this lady in his constituency said to him, "Vote for you? I'd rather vote for the devil." Whereupon he said, "My dear lady, just in case your best friend is not running, will you consider giving me your support?" And of course, the classic that I suppose so many of you know is with Lady Astor. Lady Astor was American born, and she was the first woman to enter Parliament in England. And in 1919 it was, I think, right? And the famous one, of course, is when they met at a function, and she said, "Sir Winston, if you were my husband, I would put poison in your coffee." And he says, "My dear Lady Astor, if you were my wife, I would drink it." And the next person you will hear from, I must tell you, and I think false modesty is the meanest species of pride. So I must say that I am bursting with paternal pride when I introduce a person who I think has given and has done so much to improve, along with Mr. Reese, Eggy Reese, we know him at school, and his family, to improve Melbourne and to bring Melbourne to where it is. He has devoted so much of his time. I refer to my son, Mark Churchill Neeson, the president.
Thank you, Mr. Master of Ceremonies. Dad. First of all, let me just welcome everybody to this very special occasion. I'm actually very overwhelmed with the support, and so I want to thank all the persons that were responsible for putting this together. So I want a big round of applause for Ms. Dorothy Hobson and her team. It would be very easy for me to say what is the common jargon now, which is all protocol observed. But in this kind of audience, I would not be doing it justice. So let me take my time and go through. First of all, Mr. Master of Ceremonies, as usual, doing a fantastic job. People always ask me, "Are you an attorney like your father?" And I said, "No, those boots are too big for me to fill." And of course, our guest speaker, Dr. Peter Phillips, Leader of the Opposition and MP. Sir Hilary Beckles, last year's guest speaker, And I had the privilege, distinct privilege, of being at your launch yesterday. And you have some predictions for West Indies cricket 2020. You might want to share them with us at some other time. But of course, the book is Cricket Without a Cause. And listen to this very carefully. Fall and rise of the mighty West Indies cricket team. Not the rise and fall, the fall and rise of the mighty West Indies cricket team. I haven't read it yet. I'm looking forward to read it. And unlike my father, I work on commissions after this. I just want to let you know. Also want to just thank Mr. Arnold Bertram, our historian. Not the first time you have spoken at Melbourne. And each time you speak, it is so riveting. We do appreciate your contribution. Thank you very much. Want to acknowledge Reverend Mott, our president, my president, Mr. Billy Heaven, president of the JCA, Mr. Courtney Francis, other directors of the JCA, members of the Melbourne Managing Committee. We have at least 3 former Melbourne presidents here. Mr. Tony Becker, sitting over here. Mr. Richard Gale, who is around somewhere working very hard. And Mr. Darren Dixon, who is sitting over there, 3 former Melbourne presidents. Also the Melbourne elite, Mr. Roddy Williams, Keith Rees, Roddy Mazuka, Mickey Hoshu, Monica Hoshu, members of the media, other special guests, ladies and gentlemen, as I said before, welcome all. This is a very special day for us. It's 125 years that we are celebrating. And through those many years, Melbourne has experienced tremendous success, but we have also had tremendous failures. After all, we're the club that produced some of the greatest players and the most celebrated players that the cricket world has ever seen. And Mr. Bertram, you alluded to players like Courtney Walsh, Michael Holding, several other test players, Frank Martin, as you mentioned. We also have the Samuels brothers, and our current captain of Jamaica that is, Mr. Nikita Miller, who is here. Big round of applause for Nikita. But this club, too, has gone through some really, really tough times. We have even been bankrupt. We have even had no cricket ground to play at because we were bankrupt. And we have been close to bankrupt on many occasions. But each time, due to the commitment, love and passion of our members of our club, many of whom have passed on, but we still have many who are here. We have always risen from the ashes to be stronger and better than before. I want to crave your indulgence just for a minute, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to ask Mr. Mickey Hoshu to stand. Mr. Hosu, could you please stand for me? Monica Hosu, she's already standing somewhere. She has been working. Mr. Roddy Williams, if he could stand, Roddy. Mr. Keith Rees, wherever he is, if he could stand, Mr. Rees. Mr. Tony Becker, and Mr. Roddy Mazuka. I want these just remain standing for me just for a moment. The reason why I've asked them to stand is because when Melbourne went through the first bankruptcy in the 60s and we lost our ground at the famous Melbourne Park, now where Kingston College campus is, these people came together and purchased this ground that we are now at from the Chinese. They came together again in early 2000 and had to bail out the club once again when we were on the verge of bankruptcy. And the significance of this is simply this. If it were not for these people, we could not be celebrating 125 years today. Thank you very much. ...2017 was a very good year for Melbourne, but it was also a very sad year. The year started in the worst possible way when on the morning of January 1st, young Stephen McLean was stabbed to death on his way home from a party with his friends. He was one of our young, outstanding cricketers, an exemplary young man, and we will mourn his loss for a long time. In recognition of his passing, we have decided to rename the Emerging Young Cricketer Award in his honor, and this will be presented here tonight for the first time. My notes are mixed up. In addition, in 2017, we had the passing of another person who was very instrumental in doing a lot of things for us. And unfortunately, she passed away and was buried last week. She died of cancer. Now, she was part of our 5K, and she actually, over the 3 years that she volunteered, and this is Keisha Ferguson, over the 3 years that she was part of the 5K team, she was struggling with her disease, and we never knew about it. At her funeral last week, it was actually a celebration of her life. And the thing that I left that funeral with was the fact that over the years that she was a part of this 5K, and she was going through all her struggles, her double mastectomy, and all of these things, she never complained once. As a matter of fact, those of us who were part of the committee did not even know that she was struggling with this disease. Her father, Trevor Ferguson, is a hardcore Melbourne man. And she grew up here, and she was a lover of all sports. Now, may her soul rest in peace. I did say that 2017 was a good year for Melbourne. Without doubt, our most significant achievement for the year was the completion of our cricket field. Save the applause, save the applause. As many of you know, the field was a disaster for several years. And at last year's award ceremony, I gave a commitment to have the field completed by this year's event. And I'm happy to say, promise made, promise kept. Applause now, please. I want to thank everybody who was instrumental in getting this done. Dr. Carlton Davies, who is the past chairman of Chase. Sometime before I had met with Dr. Davis, we discussed the possibility of Chase making a donation to the traditional cricket clubs. He made me a promise that if I were able to get the business plans of all the 5 traditional clubs together, that is Boys Town, St. Catherine, Kingston, Melbourne, and Kensington, and give them some background history and provide a compelling argument for Chase to support the program, then he would do all within his power to see if he could assist the clubs to regain their former glory. I want to thank Waverly Hines, who represented Kingston, John Lage who represented Kensington, John Lage from Kingston, O'Neill Cruikshank, Lucas, Randy Nelson from St. Catherine, and Delroy Simmons, now deceased from Bytes, for completing this requirement in record time. And as a result of that, I think it played a big part in us getting the grant. Now, the grant is not only for Melbourne, it's for all the traditional clubs, including the parishes. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank the current chairman of Chase, and of course the CEO, Mr. Billy Heaven, who is also the president of the JCA, for the continued support of the program. Thank you very much, sir. I actually pressed Billy really hard at our last awards dinner. And he said, the funds will be released, Mark. And the funds were released. So thank you very much, Billy.
You have just watched Beyond the Soundbites. Thanks for watching.